Welcome to the Staffing Playbook Podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the dynamic world of staffing and HR. I'm your host, Stephen Farrell. Join me each week as we dive deep into the strategies, insights, and stories that shape the staffing industry. From the latest trends to expert interviews and practical tips, we'll equip you with the right tools and knowledge to succeed in the staffing industry. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, the Staffing Playbook is here to help you play your best game. Let's get started.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome. Happy Friday. Ian, how are you doing today?
What's up, Steven? Thanks for having me on, man. It's turning out to be a good happy Friday, getting close to the weekend, so excited for that for sure.
Yes. Well, this is the third episode of the newly launched The Staffing Playbook Podcast. We've been lucky to have Ian, founder of Grow Up Leadership, join us in all three episodes. So we're excited to have you on this third episode. Today's topic is a bit challenging, Ian. It's about having difficult conversations, yes. and with that is why they're really not that difficult. And we're going to explain. We're going to give you some insights, some different strategies to make these conversations easier, and more effective and not so difficult. And so I know you and I both have a lot of experience over the years in having difficult conversations. I don't know about you, but I've also been on the receiving end of a difficult conversation a few times in my career. Yes. And I've been in some really empowering ones.
For sure.
And then I've been in ones that make me just like want to, close the door behind me and never look back. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Difficult conversations, it's a part of certainly business and management, staffing, especially. And, I think hopefully we're going to cover some topics and discuss some tips and just concepts that will be helpful for anyone in life. I mean, I think, there are conflicts, there are challenges that we all face in all kinds of elements. And so having some strategies to have better conversations, crucial conversations, meaningful conversations is helpful for everyone.
Yeah, certainly. It's, I want to start it off with, there's this fear of having difficult conversations. There's just these common reasons people avoid having difficult conversations. Number one is just that fear of conflict, right?
Yeah.
Conflict is not avoidable. It'll come knocking on your doorstep. No matter how long you avoid it, it'll come back and confront you. There's a fear of hurting feelings. And then there's the fear of the unknown, like, how's this person going to respond based on my conflict? And it's not just conflict resolution if you're a leader in a management role and you're having a difficult conversation with one of your employees. It's also with your colleagues. It's other department heads. It's your boss, right?
Yeah.
These are all forms of difficult conversations that all of us will be presented at one time or another in our career. And we've got to understand that fear and why we're having it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think fear is a big factor to consider. But what I challenge people to do is really think of this as an opportunity, to move past this thing that's looming over and making things difficult, whether it's an employee who is not performing, or maybe it's a challenging relationship you have with a peer at work, or maybe you have some concerns that you you want to address with your boss. And I fully understand the fear of having that conversation because, it can feel icky and, there can be feelings involved and all of that. And what I would suggest oftentimes is really try to remove the feelings and get down to the facts and put in some effort to prepare. And I would say for any conversation, that would be probably the biggest recommendation, suggestion is make sure that you spend some time preparing. I will say certainly, there's been times where I think, oh, this is going to be an easy conversation. I just need to talk to this person about this thing. And I don't prepare and I have gone in and it blows up in my face. And things don't go as well and it's awkward and maybe I'm stumbling around or they're reacting differently than I was anticipating. Versus when I have prepared and maybe I've even over prepared in terms of really having all my facts and all my information and my practice of what I want to say, an opening kind of statement and all of that. And it goes super smoothly, because I'm worried about it and I'm invested in it and it often goes better than planned. So preparation is really key. With that too, we're even kind of starting with preparation. I will say one of the main things is figure out, I think it's important to figure out the distinction of what this conversation is first. And that's kind of where we start, is this, what's the dynamics there, right? Are you a boss having a conversation with an employee? Again, is it peer to peer? Is it, somebody in a different department? Is it you having a meaningful, crucial conversation with your boss? And that's really where you want to start. And then really start to think about what are the goals that you want to achieve with that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Preparation is step one. Preparation is key. It's, you've got to set the objective before the conversation. What is my purpose of having this conversation? What is the expected outcome based on this conversation? What are those key points that you need to address and to not avoid? Some of those key points might be very difficult. And one thing that we all do, I think, before going into a meeting is we're anticipating what the person's response is going to be, right? I don't think that's wrong. I think you should anticipate, but anticipate multiple types of response. Is it going to be a positive response or a negative response? Or is it going to be a no response, right? Someone shuts down. It's not about just what the person is saying. It's what they're telling you through their tonality, through their body language, right? You've got to prepare for that because your objective doesn't change necessarily, but maybe neither do the key points, but maybe the way you approach them may change slightly.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you need to know your audience and kind of how they're going to react and how they're going to respond. And again, I think this is all in that preparation and thinking about what you're wanting to achieve. There's a great book, Crucial Conversations, that's out there. It's it's a much older book. And so it's got some great tips and it does really talk about the preparation side. So I'd love to dive into some specifics on preparation.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So a colleague and excellent consultant, Pamela Villars, she used to provide a training that I remember attending, and she shared some excellent steps with me for crucial conversations. And so first, I think that with preparation, again, this is you investing some time before, to really prepare. First, you want to make sure you need to understand that root problem. And I will say too, oftentimes, when I have talked to people about this, and even myself, we can get fixated on the symptoms of the problem, right? So there's, somebody's responding this way, or maybe the morale is low or performance is low, but is there some more serious root problem that's going on that's causing these symptoms? So if you can truly try to dig deeper and to figure out what that root problem is,
diagnose the root cause,
diagnose that root cause. And really, if you can pull out of that, what are the facts? What are those facts that are there that that exist. And I think that what can really help when, especially when you're thinking about a difficult conversation and you're thinking about someone who is you yourself or having a lot of feelings around that, a lot of anxiety, fear, like you were saying,
Yeah.
about having this conversation. It's important again to identify what those facts are versus what are your assumptions. What stories are you telling about this person?
Yeah, there's a narrative there that you
Right.
tell yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it's like going back to what are the facts, right?
Right. So there's a concept called the fundamental attribution error, which is basically where we kind of attribute things incorrectly. So we often make assumptions based on others' actions, but don't hold ourselves to those same standards, right? Or we hold
Right.
ourselves to a different standard. There's a psychologist, Dr. Bob Duke, from a great podcast that I love called Two Guys on Your Head. He says, we judge others by their actions. We judge ourselves by our intentions, right?
Mhm.
So the common the common example that oftentimes gets shared when we're driving on the highway and we're speeding, it's because we're late and we need to get somewhere. But when we see somebody else speeding, right? Somebody else is going fast. Well, they're a jerk and they're careless and they don't care about these people, right? So there's that difference of really being able to identify, okay, am I putting this assumption on this other person, and what are the facts there? So I think that's really the point, is to make sure that you're kind of checking that story that you're telling ourselves.
Yeah. That is crucial. I love that feedback, because we're always making assumptions and we're assuming
Right.
that we're right, and
Right.
we're interpreting,
Yeah.
the intent
Uh-huh.
of the person that we're talking to, and that's the wrong way to go about it. There's also something about choosing the right time and the right place to have the meeting, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So and what's interesting too, from a crucial conversation standpoint, and I think again, it's understanding those dynamics and all of that. But once you've prepared, and there's another element too with the preparation that I'll jump back to, but what is suggested oftentimes, especially if it's the dynamics are different than just your kind of regular boss employee dynamics, what's always suggested is to ask for permission to discuss. And I
Mm,
think that's an area where we don't oftentimes do this, where we just kind of barge in or come to someone finally when we've done all our preparation and now we're ready, and we just come and kind of dump on somebody else. Asking for permission up front hey, I have something serious that I'd like to discuss about this kind of thing. Tell me, let me know if you have some
I feel like I'm being
availability.
called in the principal's office when you said that. I have something serious for you to discuss.
Well, I mean, I think however you want to phrase it, depending on, but there's something I'd like to chat with you, Stephen, about. When you have time, let me know when would be a good time to discuss that, or is that something you'd even be interested in discussing with me? Maybe you're not, but the point is that you're trying to make that collaborative kind of opportunity for both of us to, because really that's where you're wanting to get to, is that in this discussion, you're going to present your concerns and some possible solutions for sure,
Yeah.
but you want to make sure that it feels collaborative, that both sides are working together to find that final solution.
That's a good point, because people feel like they're cornered, right? They didn't have
Mhm.
time to prep. They didn't have time to really think through their responses. So sometimes the natural, reflex is to shut down or just be
Yeah.
agreeable or disagreeable. But there's certainly many cases where you can allow that prep time to happen, right? To let them know we're going to have a discussion about this. I'd like to schedule it with you later today or tomorrow. And now it's more of a collaborative conversation versus like I'm gonna bombard you with all of these key issues,
Yeah.
and now you just feel attacked.
Right. Yeah, you're just dumping, here's this problem. And I mean, I certainly have experienced this. I'm sure you have as well, where you are, someone clearly has some issue or something that they need to bring to you. You're dealing with your day and all the things through it, and they come, knock on the door, hey, I need to talk to you about this thing. And you're cornered, you don't have an opportunity to process and prepare in your own way, or at least mentally prepare, even if you don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
So jumping back, I will say, and that kind of speaks to, again, just thinking of the when, the where, the timing, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, certainly, I think in any time you're having a serious conversation or providing someone feedback, the more private the setting, the better, for sure. I mean, you don't want
Yeah.
somebody to feel embarrassed, and that their performance or their something that is a concern about them is being discussed and shared openly in front of their peers.
You're not wrong about that. I've seen that, unfortunately, countless times in my career, where someone is being disciplined in front of their peers. This
Yeah.
difficult conversation is being had right in front of everybody, and you're just, I mean, completely inappropriate. That's not the time or the place or the setting. And I think, because there's that suggestion out there of, like, you need to have it immediately, right? There's a problem, address it. Don't let it, don't ignore it. Don't let it build up where it becomes this huge blow up. I agree with that. But that doesn't mean you go in hot headed, don't worry about anything else, and you're like, I'm just going to address it because it needs to be addressed. That's the
Yeah.
wrong approach. It's the right approach in addressing it immediately, but you need to choose the right time and the right place and the right setting to do that.
And I think this goes back to that, again, that preparation and really thinking about what is the goal you're trying to achieve. And I will say this: what if the goal is is your goal to embarrass this person and make them feel terrible about themselves, or is the goal for them to improve in this behavior, to change this dynamic, to change how they're performing or interacting with you? It's usually the latter, right? Your goal should not be to embarrass them and to make them feel terrible about themselves. And if it is, I would highly encourage you to check yourself and check the goals of your role.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, when you're getting ready to sit down with someone and have a difficult conversation, you really should not beat around the bush. You should, acknowledge, Kurt on here, comment on LinkedIn, acknowledge the relationship.
Hmm.
What that could mean is acknowledging, like, hey, Ian, this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation that we're about to have. But just know that I'm here to support you and to help us come to a resolution for both of us so we can move forward. So again, this is going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to try to make it as less uncomfortable as possible, but we're going to do this together.
Yeah. And that acknowledging the relationship, that we are collaboratively working together to achieve some larger goal. And I see this as something that's impeding that, or having this impact. And so making sure you understand the impact, and acknowledging that again, we have these collective kind of larger goals that we are working towards, a higher purpose, what have you. I mean, that, really, I think, is at the essence of your preparation. And it's so important to just acknowledge the importance of this relationship, and that I want to continue to have a great relationship with you, Stephen. That kind of thing. And I think we work well together, and what have you. And so then let's focus on the solution for this
That's right.
problem that I see.
Yeah.
There's
Do you find a lot of inexperienced leaders, even experienced ones, in these difficult conversations typically use the word you? This is what you did. This is what you're doing or not doing, versus this is what I have noticed, and I want to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think great question, and a great point. I think in general, That's a common statement that you want to make sure that you're using I statements in general as much as possible. That, I observe this, and you're coming from, this is where I am. This is my perception, but I want to now hear your side, instead of just placing, this kind of, attributes on somebody. Again, that's that fundamental attribution error where we are attributing something or making this assumption about someone, and that may not be it at all. There may be something more to it. So again, oftentimes, that's just in general with feedback, that you want to be sharing your observations, the situation, the impact that you see, but again, taking that context where you are focused on them being able to provide their perception as well, and not you placing that on them or attributing that.
That's right. I did have one thought on the I and you as well.
Yeah.
Is, because you're deflecting when you're saying you, right? It's just this is all you. It's not me. But another mistake I see a lot of leaders make is back to that I own this. They'll say, "Hey, my boss saw this. He or she was really upset, and I was told to have this conversation. I was told to write you up. Hey, corporate told me to do this. HR told me to do this."
Yeah.
They're not taking ownership of their own team.
Right.
They're just passing the buck up to their superiors and blaming it on them because somehow it makes it more comfortable.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I've made that mistake early on in my career, of not taking ownership of my role, and kind of making it sound like, well, I don't agree with this, but this is kind of what we need to do going forward. You need to change this behavior. And again, I think in general, it's thinking about that larger goal that we're trying to achieve, and making it feel collaborative, that we are collectively trying to achieve these goals, whatever they may be. And your role, especially if you are that person where you are having to hold people accountable, that is your role. You are responsible for their performance. And so that, again, that's where, even in the preparation part, is really thinking about those dynamics and what's your position in this. I think that's one of the things too that I always try to remind and share and help, new leaders kind of understand, is that they can't, they can't actually do the work for this person. You are just helping kind of provide that guidance and that understanding of what are the expectations and how are you performing against that. And you're there to facilitate their successful performance, but you're not, you shouldn't feel bad if this person is struggling with that, if you're the person having to give them that news. So, I think it's challenging, but
it is. I think another key tip in this conversation is the power of active listening to understand rather than to respond.
Yeah.
And especially, you've done all this prep work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got a lot you got your objective, you got your key things you want to talk about. And so it's really easy to take over the conversation and you do all the talking. And again, it's counterintuitive to what we're trying to accomplish. We want a positive outcome out of this conversation. So if you if you're doing all the talking and not any listening, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to lose that what could have been a great employee. And it's one of those things where you do less talking, ask more questions, get more details, try to understand how they're seeing things versus how you see them.
Yeah, absolutely. You should be doing, in any feedback conversation, you should be doing, 50% or less of the talking. I would suggest less than that. I think, when you're thinking about that, again, your preparation. So again, figuring out those facts of what you need, what you want to share, or what are those kind of factual things there versus your assumptions. And then also I would suggest having your solutions. So what are the solutions you want to see? so that you're not just dumping this problem on somebody, but you are actually providing them with some potential solutions or your ideas for possible solutions. Again, make it collaborative, and that's where you're going to open that up. One of the other components to crucial conversations that's recommended, that you also, in addition to asking for permission to discuss, you also, in your preparation stage, you also create what they call an opening statement, and that's kind of this very, succinct, clear, straightforward, almost Twitter version of what's the issue and what are the possible solutions here. But really, just making sure that you're communicating the issue and the impact, to that, and then you stop there and you allow them, and you can even say, I'm sharing this with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear how are you feeling about this, or what's your perception of this situation?
Yeah, it's that shifting from problem focused to solution oriented dialogue.
Right.
Right. If your goal is to go in there and fire somebody, okay, that's not a difficult conversation. I mean, it is difficult,
Sure.
right?
But it's different. It's very clear what your
Very
objective
clear.
is.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of dialogue
No,
in that
there's not.
conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're shifting to being that solution oriented dialogue, it's much different from, you're not talking about all the problems
Right.
throughout the whole conversation. It's like, here's the problem. Here's that starting statement that you mentioned. What'd you call it?
The opening statement.
Opening statement.
Yes.
And so here's the facts. And now it's time to listen. And now it's time to focus on solution oriented dialogue.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, once you've delivered this kind of opening statement and you start this dialogue again, and I think the point you were making is it's the interaction is going to vary depending on, again, the dynamics of the relationship and what you're wanting to achieve, those goals you're wanting to see. And again, if you're someone in a management position and you have an employee who's maybe not performing, how many times have you had this conversation? What are the expectations going on there? So then it's all those things really need to come into play. Is this more of a corrective action type of, or there's so many different terms, performance improvement plan, that kind of thing. What level is that even? If it's a termination, again, to your point, I mean, that's going to be very different, and that should generally be very short and to the point, straightforward. That Ian, we've discussed this multiple times. We haven't seen the level of improvement, sustained at this time. We've decided to terminate your employment, something like that.
Yeah.
And you move very quickly then to having somebody from HR sharing benefits and that kind of thing, and make it as short and sweet as possible. This is really not what it is, again, difficult conversation, but what we're talking about here is you're hopefully trying to come to some solution together collaboratively and have some behavior change on the other side of that.
Yeah. I want to hit on 3 topics just real quickly.
Yeah.
Dealing with emotional reactions, handling defensiveness or denial, and then navigating power dynamics, which we'll spend a little bit more time on that when it comes to approaching your supervisor and a colleague versus your subordinate. So, Ian, what are some tips on owning emotions and helping the other person manage theirs?
And I think starting out, again, this is part of that preparation, and we kind of talked about this and hit on this, is knowing your audience. And there are some, there's actually some not only there's some ways where people respond to feedback that are kind of common ways. You have the jokester, you have the person who maybe gets very down on themselves and acts very defeated. The person who, I guess I'm terrible and I'm no good at this, or the person who jokes about it, who's like, well, it's just me, that I'm Ian, I'm an idiot kind of thing. Or you have the person who's very combative. And that's not me, and doesn't take responsibility, and that's somebody else's fault. So understanding hopefully you've been working with this person enough that you've seen and observed, or maybe even if you're not sure, being able to talk to someone else who's maybe has a stronger relationship with that person, but understanding how they receive feedback can really be helpful in your preparation up front if you can. And I know this is kind of a different concept, but there oftentimes are ways that people have these kind of defense mechanisms, right? We've been getting feedback our entire lives through, through schooling and all of that kind of thing, through our parents, family, whatever. And so people just have kind of a way that they respond to feedback, or negative feedback, constructive feedback.
Yeah, a lot of people use the word constructive criticism, and I hate that term.
Yes.
That's not you're not trying to give constructive criticism.
Right.
You're giving constructive feedback.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so, if you have a boss that comes in and says, "Hey, I'm going to, it's going to be a hard conversation. I'm going to give you some constructive criticism," immediately you're like, I'm out, right? And walls are
mentally, yeah, you're like, yeah, you're going to respond however you're going to respond. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I think being careful about the words, and again, this is that preparation, being really careful about the words that you choose, even to set this up. Again, to Kurt's point, look, I care about our relationship, and the goals that we're trying to collectively achieve. Here's some things that I see, some challenges that I'd like for us to collaboratively figure out how to overcome.
Yeah.
Again, if you can make that other person feel valued for the things that they do bring, give them opportunities to be heard, I think you're going to really change those dynamics, and that's where you can really make that difference as far as how somebody's going to react.
Yeah. So let's just say we do our best prep work, but you have the person in front of you that's defensive or in denial. How do you change anything to your approach? I mean, how do you handle someone that's you went in very soft and very clear, but still they're being defensive or they're in denial?
And I think it really depends on, again, what are the goals you're trying to achieve. From a coaching standpoint, right? If you're trying to coach somebody, there's a concept called being ready, willing, and able. And if you identify that this person is not willing to receive this feedback, and that kind of thing, not ready for being coached, then you might take a step back. Now, if it's something where it's a dynamic where you are a manager of an employee and you need them to improve, then sometimes you do just have to press forward and be very clear, and so oftentimes too, with feedback, one of the things that you're looking for is a commitment to resolve, right? So you share, here's the situation, here's that impact that I'm seeing. Can I get commitment to resolve, kind of thing? In a manager employee situation, there's a whole nother level or dynamic of potential consequences, right? Not only just the impact to their peers, to the business, to their customers, but in this case, it could be impact to their progression of their job, or maybe that their job might be in jeopardy. And so if that is now moving to that case where they need to be performing at some level and they're not, regardless of how they're receiving that, I highly suggest being very clear and factual about, we need you to perform at this level, and this is what our expectations are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Some people, it just feels like a wall. You can't break through. They're defensive. And so at that point, it's just like, okay, well, here's what I need from you moving forward. Can you commit to that? And if you can't, I need to know now, right?
Let's
talk about an exit strategy. If you just feel like this is impossible, you don't want to commit to it, that's okay. We can part ways. Sometimes I've just said, look, Ian, I can tell I caught you off guard with this conversation. I own that. That was my fault. How about we take a break and let's meet again in a couple hours or tomorrow, and we'll both have clear heads, and let's just, again, let's talk about the solution, the outcome, let's focus on that. Can we take a break and come back when we're both, a little bit more level-headed? That's my mistake. I'm sorry, I caught you off guard. Let's try this again.
Yeah, excellent point, and I agree 100%. I mean, I think you need to read the room, and then again, that's why the value of asking for that permission. Again, it really depends on this dynamic. If we're talking about manager or employee, I mean, obviously you need this person to perform or improve. But if you're, again, talking to a peer or, even sharing something with your boss, and I think there is a level that we all have to, we all have feedback for our boss at some point, and we need to kind of manage up. And it's important to feel comfortable in having those conversations. But regardless, yeah, depending on the dynamics as far as the power dynamics go, either it's sharing those consequences or saying let's reset, at a later time.
Yeah, let's hit on for a quick minute having a difficult conversation with your boss, and so no one likes to have a difficult conversation with their boss, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's reverse roles, and it's just like, yeah, this is going to be hard. And I think all these principles really still apply in that conversation. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. The stakes are different, the situation's different, but I would say spending that time to prepare and have your clear kind of opening statement of this is the problem, this is the impact, and these are solutions I propose. But again, I want to hear your perception on the situation, and have a collaborative conversation. Hopefully your boss, part of their job is to help you be successful. And if they are somehow getting in the way of that, I would hope that they would acknowledge that and want, really desire to make that improvement, whatever, or do whatever they need to do to help you be successful. So, it can be challenging for sure. And I will say that's the other part too, is really asking for permission, and trying to set that timing and that tone, because, as director of sales, you're busy. And so,
right.
You need that space to really kind of have that meaningful conversation with your employee. So don't just go and jump on top of Steven when he's trying to do all his other 800 tasks in the day.
Yeah, you hear that, boss? No, but really, it's one of those things where it's like you want to let your boss know, I'd like to have a conversation with you. It should only take about 30 minutes.
Right.
This is the topic I'd like to discuss. This is a real challenge that I'm having. And I'd like to have a solution-oriented dialogue with you. And then your boss might go, well, what's your challenge? Well, hey, Ian, this is going to be a 30-minute conversation, and I want to give you time to prepare for it. So here's what I want us to talk about. And can let's look at our schedule, our calendars, and see when there's a good time for us to both meet.
Well, and that's why I suggest having that opening statement prepared before you go in for the asking for permission, because they may be, I have time right now, I want to talk about it, right? What you want to make sure, especially for a boss, and I think this is something that we hear consistently, for the higher you go up with from an executive standpoint, the shorter, the more direct you can be, the better for that individual. They have so much information that's oftentimes being thrown at them. You need to be direct and clear. If you go in there and you're hemming and hawing and you're kind of, well, I really like working with you, but there's this, sometimes when I got this thing and then there's like the stuff, and you just sound all over the place, versus you just come in and say, hey boss, so when we're working together on these projects, you've moved the deadline multiple times and it has this impact on me. Here's a solution I'd like to ask for. Could we make sure that we have a clear scope or a clear deadline for these projects that we're working on going forward?
Yeah.
To stop, be very clear and direct. And that's why, again, that preparation can make a huge difference.
It does. I want to share a quick story. You know, I just an example of when I was receiving feedback. I was the one being the topic at mind for a difficult conversation. And my boss came to me and just hit me with the laundry list of everything that I'm doing wrong and didn't do. And and to me it was like completely took me off guard. I was really surprised and quite frankly heated. Did not understand where this was coming from. Like, are you firing me now? Like, it wasn't just one thing. You hit me with 10 all at once. And I had to really just kind of listen and just go, okay, tell me more. Like, I want to understand where this came from and why.
Nice.
And then at the end of the meeting, I said, you've given me a lot to think about. I don't know what I agree or disagree with. I mean, at the top of my mind, there's a lot that I go, that doesn't sound right. But I need time to digest this, think through it, just look a little inward. And I'd like us to meet again in a couple of days, because this is just a lot for me to digest, and I need time. Would that be okay? My boss was like, absolutely. This is a lot. I'm really sorry. In hindsight, I should have been addressing these things as they happen one at a time. And so that's fine. And so a couple days went by. We had a second meeting, completely different type of meeting. It was very positive. It was solution oriented. And it gave me time to reflect. I was like, you know what? 6 out of those 10 are absolutely correct. Before, I would have thought only 2 were correct. Right. I own that. That was my mistake. And here's what I'm going to do to correct it immediately. And thank you for bringing this to my attention. And by the way, could you do me a favor? Like, now that we've had this hard conversation, would you mind, when things come up in the future, like, just come to me immediately. Let's talk about it. I want to work through it. The last meeting we had was really disheartening. It was really hard. I know it needed to be had, but I'd like to have it in a different way. Is that okay? And my boss was like, absolutely.
And you handled it very professionally, I will say, Stephen. But this is an excellent example of what to do, what not to do, right? As far as your response, I think was excellent. That initial approach, I think that's a result of what you were kind of talking about at the very beginning of having this fear. We have this fear of this conversation, and all these things pile up and we don't address them. If we need to have a serious conversation, a difficult, meaningful conversation, we should be addressing that in a timely manner. And I think that's one of the biggest things I see, is that people pile up all this stuff, and then this, and then this, and then this, and they just overwhelm the person, and there's no opportunity for actual solutions. I think, had it been someone else who didn't handle it as professionally, it could have been, really bad. That person could have just said, screw this, I'm out, quit, had, a back and forth. Well, you suck too as a boss, by the way.
I've done that before.
Certainly, I got some things for you, by the way, that kind of thing. I mean, there's that kind of piling up of concerns can really have a negative impact. And I assume that's what that was, but overwhelming somebody in this situation is not going to go well. So preparation is key.
Yeah, agree. So what are some of the benefits of having difficult conversations long term in your mind?
I think in general, understanding that at work we have all these different folks, right? And we are focused on some larger goals. The reality is there is always going to be disagreement of how we achieve those goals. There's going to be disagreement of priorities. There's going to be disagreement of solutions. So we should be understanding that conflict and challenges are going to come up, that people may not understand the behaviors to be successful. They may not understand the expectations clearly, whatever it may be. And it requires us to collaboratively work together to achieve these larger goals. That's why you have the dynamics that you see in a workplace, and people in different roles and responsibilities and all of that. going in, understanding that, I think then can set you up for being, almost excited as far as the opportunities for having a difficult conversation. Is let's get past this kind of, concern, elephant in the room, and let's get down to the solutions and work together and have some
Did you
success.
just say excited to have a difficult conversation?
I mean, I will say, I've certainly, it's scary in the beginning, but I will say that you come out of them. I've had enough where you've come out on the other side and both sides feel great. They feel energized. They feel like they both have focus. And, again, it can be scary and intimidating, but I mean, I get excited about this kind of stuff, the conflict, because it doesn't mean that I hate you or we're angry or we're going to be mean to each other. I actually value you. I care about our relationship, and I want us to both be successful. So let's figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, the topic of this is difficult conversations are really not that difficult.
Right.
And what we're saying is there's an easier way to go about it, so it's not that difficult. They're still difficult,
Sure.
but the benefits of having these difficult conversations, which you hit on, you're improving relationships, you're building trust because now we can be honest with each other.
Absolutely.
You've got a better team dynamic because of it. You've got a better workplace culture. And then I think even more importantly, which this all leads into this, is there's personal growth. There's increased confidence and communication skills on both sides. We're growing together through this conflict because we're doing it together. We're working it out versus, going in there like a bull in a china shop.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, again, when you don't address it, that's oftentimes what happens, is that it builds to this extreme level, and then just both sides are upset and overwhelmed, and it's no good for business.
Yeah. Well, any other thoughts before we kind of summarize everything?
And first, shouts out to Mario and Kurt and Jenny for hanging out with us, and I appreciate the comments there. I think, again, seeing the big picture in work and the relationships that you're trying to build and all the stuff that we've kind of talked about in these previous podcasts as well. It's really about how you achieve those goals, is about building those good relationships. And it starts with having honesty and openness. And so, don't think of them as difficult. Think of them as, I would challenge you to reframe them as to crucial or even meaningful conversations.
Meaningful. Yeah, I like that. Well, just to summarize, let's understand the fear going into a conversation, difficult conversation, and that there's going to be fear on both sides. So what can you do to remove that fear? Right. One of those things is to set the stage before the meeting and just invite them to have a discussion with you, to join a discussion with you. And here's the topic at hand. If you can disclose the topic, sometimes you can't, depending on the type of conversation. Having a key strategies to approach this conversation. Preparation is key. Yes. Choosing the right place, the right time, the right setting. Effective communication using I statements rather than you. Staying focused on the solution, having solution-oriented dialogue, and have a dialogue around how we overcome those challenges, and have that end goal in mind.
Yes.
Right. What is the ultimate objective of this meeting? And you need to go into it with a collaborative approach, and you need to listen more than talk.
Right. Absolutely. 100% agree. All that. Excellent stuff.
Well, what a fun conversation, Ian.
I know. It wasn't that difficult, was it? It was.
And for those listeners, please make sure you subscribe on podcast, Podbean, or podcast, Spotify, Podbean. Leave a comment below if you've had a difficult conversation. We'd love to hear your stories. And just remember, these are people we're dealing with. These are relationships.
Yes.
And so you do need to remove the emotion, but that doesn't mean you remove the empathy.
Right.
And so let's take a collaborative approach. Let's win together and work towards a solution, and we're all going to be better for it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks
said.
for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.
Grow Up Leadership. Make sure you go check out his channels. He's also a leadership coach for individuals and for companies. And as you can see, Ian's a brilliant guy. He's well-versed on these topics, and he can help you in any of these situations.
Absolutely. Please reach out. Thanks again for having me, Stephen. I appreciate it. It's always good.
Thank you. And we'll see you guys next Friday. Take care.
Bye, y'all.